Let's get straight into it then, shall we? Straight into politics. It's all been kicking off, hasn't it? Quite frankly, I've got to say, I think a lot of what is going on at the moment is shameful. Have you seen the absolute state of our politics? Whether it's people just resigning, getting arrested, you name it. It makes me feel more and more politically homeless, more and more disconnected. The more and more like putting my head in my own hands and just sighing. So it does. Anyway, Nigel Farage, he has been speaking out on the Camilla Tominley show, no less, this weekend. Let's listen to what he had to say.
There are now, and I've heard it this morning, major Conservative donors and supporters who say they will never support the party again.
Right.
Now, you know, maybe in 10 years they will, but they will never support the party again. So there is an opportunity, if Boris Johnson wanted to, and to use, and the good side of Boris, of course, is, you know, well, just look at today's newspapers.
Yeah.
He's very good at dominating news.
Yeah.
He does have personality. He does make people smile. And if he wants to defend his Brexit legacy,
yeah,
well, I want to defend my Brexit legacy too. So would there be a possibility of a new coming together on the centre-right? It'd be Boris Johnson. There'd be other MPs that would join in with this as well.
See, I find that quite interesting because I do think, Ben Habib, there are a lot of people right now, not least for the reasons I was just setting out, who do feel incredibly disconnected right now. They do feel incredibly politically homeless. So people like Reform Party, there's others springing up left, right and centre.
Well, on the right.
yeah, left, right, yeah, you get what I mean. But what do you think then to what Farage was just suggesting, alluding to there, about a Johnson-Farage joining you guys at Reform?
Well, can you imagine the impact it would have on the political landscape if you had Nigel, who is arguably one of the best campaigners in the United Kingdom, political campaigners in the United Kingdom, allying with Boris Johnson, who undoubtedly is equally good. You know, two great campaigners, politicians coming together and energising British politics from the right. I can't think of a better way for Reform UK to make a massive impact on the electorate.
Do you think so? Under first past the post, as it currently stands,
yeah.
I mean, UKIP, for example, they got about 4 million votes, didn't they, back in 2015? Didn't really get any seats other than a defection. So would it have that much of a difference in the system as it stands today?
I think the first effect it would have is to utterly wipe out the Conservative Party.
Oh,
and I
bold
suspect
statement there, Ben.
Well, I think the Conservative Party are facing an existential threat already. But if Boris and Nigel got together, you know, they would take all those marginal seats that came over to the Conservative Party for the first time in the 2019 general election. They're probably gone, but they would definitely be gone in that unified campaign. And I think there would be a real chance of candidates across the country getting places. But here's why it's not going to happen.
It's getting us into it then.
I know.
The viewers at home was like, yes,
well,
yes.
The imagery is fantastic, and I've often reflected on why it is that genuine centre-right Conservatives who believe in low taxation, deregulation, putting the United Kingdom's sort of enterprise first, private sector first, why they haven't left the Conservative Party already. And here's the truth of the matter. Nigel entered politics because he was triggered by a desire to get something done. I entered politics because I was triggered by a desire to get something done. Boris Johnson and the vast majority of Conservative Party parliamentary MPs got into politics because they wanted to get into politics, because they saw politics as a means to an end in itself. They're not ideologically driven. Boris is not ideologically driven. We know that from the last 48 hours sort of hullabaloo, because they're all obsessing about their peerages and what comes next, and Rishi lied and I did this and I did that. They're not driven. They're not driven by the same things that Nigel's driven. They're not driven by the great good of the country.
And that's why you don't think that the dream team, I suspect it won't be your dream team, though, Farage.
I've had, but I'm not sure there were ones I enjoyed.
Do you think if it did happen, though, Farage, Johnson, Reform, do you reckon, as Ben says, that would be an attractive proposition that would hoover up a lot of the votes? I do.
I think it would hoover up a certain amount of the Conservative Party's current support, or previous support at the 2019 election, certainly. There are two Very, very crudely, there are two kinds of Tory voters. There's your more traditional Tory voter, the shire voter, the suburban voter, who were put off by the style of politics we've seen over the last sort of 5-10 years. And then there's the new Conservative voter, probably a little bit older, a little bit more working class, who are actually really attracted by the notion that something's being shaken up and properly changed. It's not what you would traditionally call conservative, small c conservative, but it's right-wing. And they really might be attracted by a new party. I think your question, Michelle, is absolutely right. The question is not, can they take over the government? Because I think any new party under first past the post, in the place that we are now, and with those traditional Conservatives, still a large voting bloc, would struggle.
Yeah, but the traditional Conservatives are not currently being served, because if you are a traditional Conservative, I imagine that you would be in favour of small state, you'll be in favour of lower taxes, you'll be in favour of things like free market economy, controlled immigration. None of those things are being delivered and have been delivered by the Conservatives as they stand.
I agree with you, and I think that they are going to be punished for exactly that. But it's the stylistic point. A lot of politics is about that awful word vibes now, isn't it? And I think there's a stylistic way in which they will not follow Nigel Farage and Boris Johnson into a new party, because they just don't like that way of doing politics. They're much more kind of calm, gentle politics. So I think, in terms of what a new party would be for, I think Ben hit it. I mean, I was actually, despite the fact that I'm completely here to disagree with you, I was nodding along to a lot of what you were saying, because ultimately this
we're voting for Farage next.
I know.
So this
I'd just like to say that will not be happening.
Never say
I'm
never.
very aware that he's on after us, but I think he'd be horrified.
Why would you say never?
Why
Wouldn't you have an open mind and wait till the next election and see who presents what and make a decision from there? Why would you?
I have an open mind within certain boundaries. Nigel Farage and I are both perfectly legitimate actors within the political sense, but we are never going to meet in the middle. He's not going to come in my direction, and I'm unlikely to come in his. In the same way that he would never vote for a party that I led, I wouldn't vote for a party he led, and that's perfectly legitimate in a democracy. No, but what I was saying about what this party could do, and Ben is absolutely right about, is absolutely either completely change forever the Conservative Party or knock it into pieces.
What's your situation anyway? So would you run again if there was a general election, or when there's the next general election?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's no point being part of a political movement or party if you're not prepared to challenge electorally. You've got to put yourself forward electorally. All the rest of it's just chat. So, I mean, we looked at the three by-elections that are coming up, and Richard Tice made a very sensible decision to let Lawrence Fox have a clear run at Uxbridge. So Reform UK will not be putting a candidate forward in Uxbridge, but we have a fantastic candidate in Mid-Bedfordshire. I don't know how much I can say.
Well, I'm sure Lawrence Fox announced that he was going to contest that seat.
Mid-Bedfordshire? No, he's doing Uxbridge.
Is he?
He's doing Uxbridge, and I've pledged my campaigning support to him because yeah, I have, because we are part of, we're part of the same fabric.
I get a bit confused about how many. So one's Reclaim, one's Reform. And one of the things that I worry about is the splitting of votes, because you've got all these different random parties.
Well, that's why Reform UK is not standing in Uxbridge.
You will recall in 2019, the Brexit Party, I actually stood in the general election for Hull. Yeah. And if truth be told, when I reflect on that, all we actually achieved was to split the Brexit vote. So the seat that I was, it's my home seat actually, where we all live, my family live, etc. Alan Johnson's at Old Seat, if you're interested. Anyway, it was Labour held. It's been Labour ever since that particular seat was set up. I really want different for that city. I believe that really in Hull you'd have a good shake-up, you could really make some change. I stood and Labour got re-elected, and the reason that they got re-elected is because, as I'm saying, we split the Brexit vote.
But you're making the Tory argument, and it's an argument.
No, I'm not making any argument. I'm telling the truth.
But, I mean, that's the argument the Tories make. That's what they say. They say vote for one of these insurgent centre-right parties and basically put Labour in. But my response to that, and I think it holds true now much more than it did in 2019, because in 2019, remember, I have some sympathy, Michelle, because in 2019 we had Boris Johnson saying he's going to get Brexit done. He's going to deliver conservative values, low taxation, control immigration, take control of our borders, all that kind of thing. None of that actually happened. But this time round, we cannot reward failure with incumbency. The Conservative Party has to learn a lesson. It won't be with Boris Johnson on our side, and I don't think it'll be with any other Conservative MPs joining us either, because I think they're all party political animals that put the Conservative Party before the national interest.
All right, you see, I think so many people do that, and I blame one of the reasons for that have been this 5-year fixed term act, because what happens is people get into Parliament, and then what they become so desperate to do is get themselves re-elected in the next 5-year window, and then it becomes about that as opposed to actually changing the country's or the towns and cities for good.